Alright, we're live now. Okay, things look actually good. Alright, my guy. You ready to rock this boat?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alright, let's prepare this. Topics are here. Alright, we have a nice cozy background music. Thank you, Funky. Thank you for the follow. See, no notifications. I'm actually using different software, that's why we had to set this up. Also, I'm going to re-edit. Like, the actual upload on YouTube is going to be re-edited. Same goes for... Yeah, same goes for... I'm thinking about putting it SoundCloud, maybe, like... We'll see down the line. Any case, last hit, and... Okay, this is there. Let me see. Okay. Let's go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone to the first episode of The F Show. My name is Fark, and we're joined with my amazing co-host, Funky Music. Now, this is a brand new podcast, and we're gonna be doing a lot of cool stuff. But first, let's hear the amazing voice of Funky. Funky, how are you doing?
I'm alive. Does that count for something?
That counts for everything that is important. Absolutely everything that is important, because Funky is a healer and I am a tank. And we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting things on this show. So let's introduce that a little bit first. Now, I always had an idea about this podcast where we could not just only talk about the game, but also talk about many different things that happen in the community. And Funky, here, just to introduce him a little bit, has been a veteran in the Wrath of the Lich King scene for quite a while now. So this collaboration to me felt somewhat natural. And over the upcoming several episodes, we're going to be covering a lot of shit that happens behind the scenes that a lot of you guys don't know. But before that, let me hear an opening word from Funky.
Yeah, just it's good to do something like this. First of all, it's fun. It's something I've never done before, so there's that aspect to it, and just talking about the game. I think that's important. Getting the information out there to people who do want to listen, and for me, it's something different, something fun, and I enjoy talk. I could talk for hours about the game. So, for me, this seems like just me sitting in front of my computer doing a live stream like I normally would. Somebody asks a question, and we just go from there. Really.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And obviously, podcast is always fun to do, and especially about something that I think both of us are very passionate. That being Wrath. Speaking of which, let's get into the nitty-gritty and let's start diving into it. I do have a cool story to tell, but I want to hear you first. Tell us, how did you exactly get into World of Warcraft? Like, how did you find the game? How did you dive into
it? Well, I had just gotten out of the army, actually, and a buddy of mine had introduced me to the game. And I was playing on some piece of crap laptop, some HP Pavilion laptop. And we used to play at his house all the time before I had high-speed internet. So I have to play on the old dial-up when I was at home. But he introduced me to it. It was a little bit after Vanilla released. And kind of got going from there and really got into the game. What got me with World of Warcraft was just the size and the scope of it. We had never really seen anything like that. And having played, Warcraft and Warcraft 2, it was something that I was already into and interested in. And just seeing the size and the scope of that game was just mind blowing at the time, back in, late 2004, early 2005. So seeing that for the first time, I know a lot of gamers now, they're not used to, or this is a normal thing to see these games so big. But at the time, we had never really seen, something on the scale and scope that World of Warcraft had released with, WoW. And so, yeah, that's what got me hooked, was just seeing the scope of it, seeing the size of it. I'm like, wow, just you realize starting as a druid how small the world is, when you're up at Tedrasil and you haven't even explored, 2% of the whole map yet. And so that was what kind of drew me in to begin with.
Yeah, no, I get it 100%. Actually, the comment you just said, that there were no games back in the day really of that scope, of that magnitude, that 100% was a thing, right? When you think about it, like, we had, just for frame of reference, we had 100 gigabyte sized hard disks. Okay, that was the capacity of our hard disks back in the day. It was 100 gigabytes. Now we have over 100 gigabyte games, right? The times have completely shifted, and to have a game of that magnitude, of that world map, was unimaginable to fit all of that in 4 gigabytes. So yeah, like when you say from that point of view, looking at it, it is really, really unique and an amazing feat to pull off what they managed to do back in vanilla. I started the same, really. I started at the late vanilla, but considering I come from a little bit of a different background, I started actually playing on a really super bad private server back in the day. It was like probably one of the first iterations of private server, which was like 1.12, and it was super buggy. It was super messy. I think at that point you could go into Zul'Gurub and tame the Hydra boss with your hunter and stuff like that. There was no cap on the max levels, so the pets could get level 255, stuff like that. Anyway, like, exploring the game was really, really fun, right? Because, like, I also come from a Warcraft 3 background and stuff like that. And I was like a huge Dota nerd when I was very young. And that made me, try retail, which was during the actual TBC back in the day. I guess you started playing, the retail version of it, or you started from the get-go, I guess, from vanilla?
Pretty much. I think I joined a couple months later. It was early 05, I think. Whenever the server Akama came out was where I was playing at the time. So,
all right. And did you do any raids during? Did you raid during vanilla or TBC at all, for that matter?
I did, not so much in vanilla. I was more focused on PvP, which, as we all know, you needed PvP. In order to do PvP, you needed PvE weapons and PvE items. So I dabbled in it a little bit. I joined a guild. They were actually the top guild on the server at the time, but it was more for the PvP side of things. I was a bench player, so when they needed me, they'd bring me, and whatever. I'd come in and get some gear that I might have needed for PvP, and then I mostly focused on PvP, playing warrior at the beginning. I had no intention of playing anything else but a warrior. So from classic to TBC, it was all warrior. TBC, I did raid a little bit more probably, but again, mostly focusing on PvP. It was kind of the same thing. Bench player, hey, we'll need you, we'll take you if we need you, or if this guy's got gear, we're gonna bring you in to pick up this item or something like that. So that was basically vanilla to TBC was all pretty much PvP.
Yeah, interesting. It was a massive mix for me. Like, for me, it was so much exploring. There was a lot of PvP, but it's like during TBC I did get into arenas later, but like during the early stages of me playing the game, I did a lot of ganking. Like, do you remember that nasty spot in the Hillsborough foothills? Like, I think I spent like just over a month ganking there and stuff like that. So it was most definitely different different times. It was a different game where like there were no rules really. You could do whatever you want, right? We didn't chase the end game as much. Whereas today we're really chasing that carrot on a stick, right? But nonetheless, I managed to hit 70 with two characters in TBC, and I did raid and I did PvP with both of them. And the one that really was amazing, in my opinion, for me was the Paladin, right? I had a Hunter and a Paladin, and I really, really loved Paladin, but my God, they were bad. Do you remember Paladins during Vanilla TVC?
I was gonna say, do you remember that they were just Rhett was what nobody played Rhett, if I recall. Shakadin, which I'm sure we'll get into, was viable, fun, but I mean, other than that, Paladins were just it was holy, and that was pretty much it. And they really didn't become, I guess, balanced or feasible, I guess you would say, until Wrath.
No, absolutely not. The only time, actually, I do have a fun story. There was a prot paladin that I remember, um, that I leveled with for the last two levels, from 68 to 70. And then on 70, because we had like just complete garble gear, we ended up questing even more in Shadow Moon Valley to pick up like a couple of items that you get, like high item level pieces that you could possibly equip, right? So I ended up healing this prot pally as a holy, and eventually I managed to get into this guy's guild, and I healed their Kara runs, right? So the story of me actually going into raiding as a holy paladin is kind of interesting, because I ended up swapping specs throughout the journey. So from 1 to 70, I swapped like specs 10 times. So I tried prot multiple times, I tried red, and I was like, eventually, you know what? Healing's kind of fun, let's do that. Because I had a hunter, like, as a main alt, I leveled two characters, simultaneously. Probably, nowadays no one does that, but hey, excuse me, at the time, it seemed like a good idea to me. I'll hop on a pally, I'll hop on a hunter, and then stuff like that. Now I want to heal a dungeon, I want to DPS it with a hunter, maybe now I want to, tank it. And eventually, I managed to get a nice, cool gear set, but one thing didn't change about that paladin that I told you that we leveled with. And that's the main hand sword. This guy kept the same, like, Excalibur's King Arthur looking ish sword from level 70 until, like, we basically completely overfarmed Kara. And that was a level 70 blue sword with spell damage and block rating. So I remember it to this day, and it's from a gorilla. And hilariously enough, that sword is not in circulation on today's TBC live servers. And that's kind of interesting because for those that don't know, there's Keepers of Time Reputation Award, which Revered gives you Continuum Blade, and every paladin under the sun gets that as the first weapon going into it. But back in the day, it was such a fringe case to see a prot paladin that they could just pick up an amazing different tanking sword for free. And I remember to this day, it is like a really cool looking Excalibur sword, and it's like one of the memories that really sticks, because like I used to heal really, really well with being a flash of light spammer during Kara. Probably people cringing because you should hold a light spam, but those are good old days back in time. Going now, thinking about it, yeah. What about you? Like, what are like your first trading experiences? Do you have any amazing stories about your first trades?
The only stories that I can that I remember that I had a good time with when we crashed the server doing we all hopped somewhere out there. I have a screenshot of it where we all hopped on the Zeppelin. We have two 40-man raids going. One went into Ogremar, another one went into Undercity, and we ended up crashing the server that night. And it was it was pretty fun doing that, just watching 80 people getting together back then. I mean, and this is back before we really had good voice comms. This is back before, things like Discord, Skype, etc., TeamSpeak. I mean, everyone was using Ventrilo back then, if you recall. And like you were talking about, though, with a paladin using that sword and whatnot throughout the course of his play, is back then what made it kind of fun, what made it really fun to me was the guides. There were no real guides. There was no, hey, this is best in slot or this. Everything was on a website. There was no YouTube at the time, so you couldn't. It wasn't like, hey, let me just Google search this. Google search probably wasn't even a thing, if I recall correctly. It was just these websites, and it was everyone's basically personal opinion about what you should use. There was no here's the math behind it, here's the reason why, etc., etc. If those sites did exist, they were very hard to come by or very hard to find. There was just a lot more unknown back then versus now, where the game's been played so long, obviously, that we know and we can test things now that we never thought about testing before. We min max now. Not saying people didn't min max then, but it was a lot more difficult to find that information versus just like now, hey, best holy paladin or something like that for whatever expansion, and poof, you've got 10 videos, 10 guides, and it's a lot easier to find that information now versus back then. So it made the game fun, in my opinion. Everyone was a lot more helpful. The player base was a lot more non-toxic. I'm sure we'll get into that later on as well. It was just everyone was trying to help everybody out. If you needed help with something, it seemed like everyone was always willing to help. If you were in a 5-man dungeon like in TBC, everyone knows that the 5-man dungeon, if you played it back then, it was a lot more intense. You had to have CC, you had to have good pulls, and pathing. You had to pick up the pats that were coming through. If you pulled a whole room, you were instantly screwed. But even if you wiped, players would like, it was a bad rap, let's just go back in and do it again. And you'd spend hours and hours in 5-man sometimes, some of the more difficult ones at least. So I don't know, looking back at that stuff, it from where it was then to now, it's totally different to me, and it's been crazy to watch it, really.
Yeah, it has been, like, specifically those older times. It has been a ride, man. It has been a ride going from the old times to now. It's I remember as well, having people with really poor connections, and you just have to deal with that. Like, they would communicate that with you, with your party, as you said, in those 5-mans, right, where you need CC. They would communicate, hey, I have a bad connection. I might need a little bit more time here or something, or that they might be lagging or having some sort of delay. And then you would just have to cope with that, right? Whereas nowadays, everything is a little bit more pushy, I feel like. Even on the casual and even on the more relaxed end, everything's, like, hey, you okay there, bud? Do I need to go back to LFG? Like, instantly now. I'm not saying, everyone is like that, but it sure does feel that way. It feels vastly different. Probably, mostly due to the LFD being a thing, but we can touch upon that a bit later.
I was gonna say, with you starting off, you said you played private server for vanilla. So was it still the same like non-toxic even on the private server scene back then? Because I didn't even know private servers existed until Cataclysm era.
Yeah,
2011. So how was it back then on the private server scene versus what you've seen now?
well, there's a whole little journey. Well, basically, it was so niche. The first private servers, the very first private servers, there was no Discord, right? There was nothing except forums. If you remember, forums were really popular. And I remember, like, whenever someone would post on those forums, they were really championed and they were greeted. Because there were no players, right? And even, like, cross-faction thing was going on as well. Like, there was this troll hunter who would have a serpent tamed as a pet and would kill this rogue. and they would like banter on the forums. Ha, my snake bit you. That's why you're mad on the forums and stuff like that. And it was like just bunch of younglings kind of, you know, coming together, and it was like a really, really niche community. So it felt really good at the time to be a part of that. And for me, at least at the time, I thought World of Warcraft was a really, really niche thing. Because, as you said yourself, you know, Googling was not really a thing. YouTube was about just to start, or was about just to pop off. YouTube was basically cat videos and fail compilations. That's all that YouTube was, right? It didn't pop off. So I managed to kind of, you know, hear about World of Warcraft from a friend, specifically private server scene. And it was mostly for fun emulation, you know, it was mostly for people to kind of play while playing the game, if it makes any sense. It wasn't like really, you know, okay, you're there in the Earthar, you gotta grind for like a week, you know, until you get your bearings. It was like, you know, sped up, it was times 12 or something like that, and you just whooshed through all of your levels, and you were just kind of playing for fun, you know, and experiencing the game. But here's an interesting thing. I used to play private servers in conjunction with a live Wrath of the Lich King. There were private servers already being emulated, Wrath of the Lich King private servers being emulated during Wrath of the Lich King era, original Wrath of the Lich King, right? So what ended up happening is you would just change your realm list, right? Just make sure, you know, you don't use your email, you don't use your password, and you can just swap between the private server and live. And what was amazing is that you could make any class, any spec, and it would work in PvP. Like, it was, for PvP wise, it was scripted really, really, really well. Like, raids were pretty much a meme. Every single boss was a target dummy. Every single boss was literally a loot pinata, so no one raided. And that's how first Rat private servers started, by being like PvP servers, like specifically dueling. Dueling was a thing, like, just, it was like only about dueling on some of these servers. Like, no one did almost any arena, a little bit of arena. BGs were non-existent. It was 80% dueling. But the cool thing about it, it was TOC patch, and you could make pretty much any class / spec combo and go in and play. You would get all of the glyphs, right? You would get all of your spells enchanted and play it. And that's where I learned so much about the game. That's what put me ahead of the curve compared to other raiders in my guild at the time, is because like I would just go in this private server and I would be like, like, what is that disco priest doing? Yo, let me copy that. Let me copy his spec. And then I would copy his spec, and then I would like make my own disco spec, and I would get the gear, and then I would go duel, and I'm like, oh, that's how this spell works. Oh, mass dispel, right? Oh, enhancement shaman. Let me try that. Okay. Oh, okay. See, that's what Flame Lash does. Nice. Okay, now wolves make sense, right? So that really, really helped me personally so much as a player to advance on the next level and be ahead of, so to speak, you know, quotations, competition, is because like I just had those private servers super early on where I would get to play anything. Like, for example, Arms Warrior, when you rent, you get, you know, you can proc your overpowers, right? Your overpowers can be proc. I think it's called Thirst for Blood or something. It's still in Cataclysm present, the talent. I don't remember it from top of my head. I don't really remember Arms Warrior stories that very well. But yeah, that's like the full story of private servers that I have. Sorry if it was a little bit ranty, a little bit long. You said you didn't know they existed until Cataclysm. That's kind of interesting. Like, how did you find about it? How did you get into them?
All right, so going back to talking about, well, we'll get back to Wrath, I guess, specifically.
Yeah.
One of the things we wanted to discuss, but so Wrath ends in what? I think November of 2010. Wrath ended, Cataclysm hit. We already had the 4.0 talents, and all that stuff. And I started playing, and I realized what they had done to Resto Druid, and we could probably get into that whole thing. There's the whole list of shit that they had done, but long story short, I quit, and it was kind of just I went back to working full time, because this is during 2008 to 2010 is when the housing market crashed. The economy everywhere was just garbage, so we all had a lot of downtime. But so I was like, man, I really miss World of Warcraft. Nothing's really filled that void. I think Star Wars: The Old Republic had come out at the time, and I had started to play that a little bit. Maybe it was later that year, I can't recall. But it never really felt the same. And my buddy, the same one who had first introduced me to World of Warcraft, was like, hey, you ever heard of private servers? There's this stuff where you can go back and play your favorite expansions and stuff like that. I was like, do they have one for for Wrath of Lich King? Because I really never got to get full best in slot. It was one of the things that I kind of wanted to go back and do and never got a chance to do. And he's like, yeah. And he turned me on to the private server scene. So I had originally started an account, then kind of stopped playing for a little bit. And the more and more I delved into it, that summer, the summer of 2011, late 2011, I was like, wow. Like, that's when the scope of all these servers, when I really guess I started to realize, okay, there's a lot of private servers. It's not just one or two. Like, there's a ton of these things. And this is back when, before, Warmain, aka Molten WoW, was really known as the best or had the most player base. People forget, there were hundreds of these private servers going on, all in competition with each other. And that's when I guess 2011 is when I really kind of figured it out, after my buddy had told me about it. So
yeah, 2011. I think I was still on the retail then. I think I was still in CAD and MOP. I quit during mid MOP. I pretty much I've put down the gavel, so to speak. I didn't come to private servers much later down the road. What's like the first what was the first private server that really you could say that it was your home, like one of the first servers where you really have sunk in ungodly amount of time, so to say?
For me, at least, it was Molten, the old Warmain. That, I mean, I had originally made an account there, started playing there, so I guess I was dabbling in it here and there. And when I came back, instead of looking for somewhere else, even though there were plenty of other servers at the time, I kind of just came back to what I knew and started playing there. What about you?
For me, it was when I actually made the comeback, because I took a big break from World of Warcraft. Actually, a huge break from World of Warcraft. And the first, well, here's the deal. I bought WoD, logged into the game, so they have garrisons, and I'm like, okay, this is exactly like the freaking farm in MOP. Nah, ain't gonna play that. Never touched the game. Then much later down the road, so that's like 3.5 years later, I managed to like get a little bit of time off of work. Legion is in discount, and this was like deep into Legion. I managed to get myself a subscription. I buy Legion, I get into that, level it to max, and I'm like, yo, what is this legendary power? I'm like, I like it. I like the fact Paladins get Ashbringer. At the time I was goofing around with a Warlock tune, and I'm like, I'm not vibing this legendary power, dude. This is not it. Like, I know a lot of community, the community loves it. A lot of people from the community love Legion. The rating might be amazing, just the fact that it feels like a Power Ranger show so much, I don't vibe with that, right? You need to deserve that Power Ranger show, in my opinion. Let me sidetrack a little bit. When you first ding the level 80 in Wrath, you're in rags. Okay? You're nobody. No one knows about you. You need to farm all of the reputations. Your gear is garbage. You're getting owned in PvP. In PvE, like, you're happy that you can find a dungeon. Okay? You're just so happy you can find a dungeon run. Whereas if you compare it like to Legion, Well, we just went into PvP. It didn't really matter that much. There are these normalizations in place. There are the systems in place that would prevent you from getting clapped, from getting owned. Same goes for PvE as well, right? You would just get into it. You would smash through content. Didn't really matter that much unless you were pushing the mythic dungeons and stuff like that. So I didn't really vibe with Legion or anything retail had to offer, and I found this TBC private server because I always wanted to really raid as a BM hunter. Once again, two of my favorite characters, Hunter and Paladin. And I found this TBC server, and it was Atlantis. And the launch was amazing. And here's the deal: I think it was one of the last private servers that launched with BlizzLike XP. I'm not kidding, times one, like actually times one. Everyone on that server leveled times one, and it was very popular. It was very populated. It was just so amazing to go back and experience everything. Leveling, of course, having the knowledge of hardcore raiding and just streaming through content. Leveling wasn't really that hard. Keep up with your gear, grind here and there, do all of the quests, and voila, and before you know it, you're on 70. So it was actually TBC that kind of was really the channel for me to find the love again for World of Warcraft. But that didn't really. It wasn't really a thing because I could only play Hunter, and Paladins and TBC, in my opinion, are in a really bad spot. Plus, the raiding meta is vastly different in TBC, but we can touch upon it a bit later. What about you? Like you said, you started with Molten, right? Can you tell us a bit of history of Molten? I don't think a lot of people, actually, I don't think there is a lot of fire starters, so to speak, that really go way back and have played Molten when it was fresh, when it was raw. Do you have any cool stories, or can you tell us a little bit about that era?
Yeah. I mean, when I look back at Molten, the scripting was terrible. Half the bosses didn't work. Lich King, for example, he did work the year prior, but for example, on him, Defile, it would grow at twice the speed. That if you stood in it, even if you had it on you, unless you got out of it immediately, and I mean immediately, it would grow and take over the whole platform on Lich King. So Valk's not picking people up. You could use your non-combat pets, and the Valks would sometimes pick them up instead of the players. So it was really goofily scripted. There was a guild, Apex and Myrmidons, I do believe was the name of it. They were cheesing Ruby Sanctum by sending a paladin outside after the initial pull, and you could just MD, because hunters had endless MD, would last the whole entire time, and they would just MD to the ads to the paladin, who would put on Crusader or just kite them on the outside, so they didn't have to worry about ads on Ruby Sanctum, I think, until they either closed it or made it basically impossible for anyone to do Ruby Sanctum for a while. So
Oh man.
it was rough. But no, there was some cool stuff though back then. I think the devs and the mods, or whoever was doing the dev work back then, although it was really badly scripted, I remember a Christmas event where you could transform yourself into any character in World of Warcraft. So people were running around as Kel'Thuzad, and he was just massively huge in Dalaran. You could run around as the Lich King and all this stuff. It was really cool. Like, that was something neat that I have never seen since or before on the private server scene, honestly. It was something that I remember just for it being just really neat, something nobody else was doing. But as far as Molten scripting goes, and I know a lot of other servers out there were just really poorly scripted. I think Warmain, or Molten at the time rather, did a really good job of promoting their website and their server. And there's a whole history to how Molten even started, which we'll save for maybe another day. But just looking back on it, yeah, there were some good fun things. Spell power hunters were a thing.
Oh yeah.
There were so many broke things that just it was comical kiting stuff with the endless MD. People were kiting world dragons into Stormwind and and then feigning death and watching the dragon just go bananas and start killing everything in Stormwind. So yeah, I've honestly, that was some fun stuff, like stuff you had never ever seen before. And you know, now now we look back on it, you're like, man, how could you play on something like that versus, the level of scripting that we have now? Not saying it's perfect, but it is a lot more in line with the original Wrath of the Lich King. So
Yeah, man, I do have to say, man, hearing the stories you tell, especially like the MD and Kitey ads with Crusader Hour, it just puts like a smile on my face. Because like you guys were the icebreakers, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, that's where you look back at private servers back then, like we were talking about. There was a lot of them, but no server really stood out. And Molten was probably the first one that everyone was like, okay, this is where I'm going to play, and it had a huge following. And it was like the first server that really had that big following. I know there was another one in TBC that they had done for private server, but it was, as far as Wrath was concerned, was Molten at the time.
Yeah, there was pretty much nothing else in the scene. I can imagine. And as I said, like I was either not playing, or I finished on a retail and then I took a massive break from the game, to focus on my career and really to do whatever I had to do in real life at the time, which was traveling across half of the continent. Um, but I did eventually discover Warmane, and I did want to kind of go back and play prot. I remember that because that's like the spec um that I didn't really perfect, if it makes any sense. Like Holy Paladins. Now, itemizing Holy Paladins is, we can have two episodes on just that topic alone. But realistically speaking, when it comes to playing Holy Paladins, mathematically there's only one best spec, and that's you use Holy right. So play wise, they were never a challenge for me. And even if you push your Holy Paladin to the limit, you got what, 4 spells including Judgment with Holy Shock, Flash, and Holy Light, and excluding raid cooldowns and stuff like that. Your core rotation is not really that complex. And I played a bunch of red. Speaking of which, here's the little gem that, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember pre-patch for Wrath of the Lich King? It was TBC, but Wrath Talents.
Yeah, season 4 had just come out in TBC, and Warriors had just gotten, and I have a couple screenshots of this from back in the day. Warriors had just gotten Blade Storm, and I remember that was wrecking in BGs and arenas. It was just utterly destroying people.
Do you remember Red Paladins during that pre-patch?
Yes, because they could fucking throw their bubble up and throw wings up and just start nuking everything until they fix that.
Yes, Avenging Wrath gave no forbearance effect to your character. Plus, on top of that, right, the actual numbers, the damaging numbers were insane. Divine Storm did not do physical damage. Divine Storm did holy damage.
Right, okay? Which there was no way around it.
Yeah, holy damage is true damage. For those who don't know, the reason why you don't get spell penetration as a paladin, here's a massive trick. It works the same way in TBC, it works the same way in Wrath of the Lich King, right? DKs have to get spell pen, okay? Keep that in mind. If you want to PvP as a DK, you need the spell penetration cap. You don't need as a paladin. Why? Because holy damage is true damage. It doesn't care about resistances. So basically what ended up happening is your Divine Storm scaled massively with weapon damage, right? You would get a super slow weapon, stack as much strength as you can, you slam that button and you just go, it just deletes everything. Plus, on top of that, because it dealt so much more damage, it did so much more healing as well, right? Currently, Divine Storm, when I say currently, I mean 335, it heals, but it is a faint memory of its former glory in comparison, right? During the pre-pitch, there was so much that you had There was so much damage. Everything hit harder. Crusader Strike hit harder. Crusader Strike, sorry, hit harder. Judgments were absolutely bonkers insane. They could crit for 3k, right? And that's kind of how Red Paladins really started. And I remember I played Red, dude, and it was bad, right? I was human. There was no Seal of Blood. You had Seal of Command. There was just nothing you could do in PvE, dude. There was literally not, you would sit there. There was no seal twisting. I mean, probably, if someone really wanted to min-max, I guess they could have seal twisted with Seal of Truth. But it was so much effort and so much mana usage for such a little DPS gain. It was just like, screw it, just DPS there, And it was like a really, really bad time. Whereas compared to, playing a hunter, your BM, boom, popping CDs, pumping steady shots, multi-shot, drop a trap, serpent sting, oh, here's a cane shot, you're pogging. You're having an amazing time as a hunter. You're a paladin in TBC, back in original TBC, you're having the worst time ever, especially as Alliance.
Oh, we used to love seeing those comps come up. But when everyone was playing Ret and you were playing twos, it was like, oh, you're playing Ret, before the Wrath patch.
Yeah.
Hit. It was like, oh, well, here's a win. It wasn't even. They were just a joke. Ret was just an afterthought. People, I think, really forget just how broken a lot of these classes were. How we look back at vanilla, and so some of the classes were just not viable at all. And you look at TBC and people are like, I really love the TBC raiding scene, which is fine. I love TBC raids. I still love them to this day. But as far as class balancing went, it was still wonky as all get out.
It still is. Even to this day, maybe we can touch upon it a little bit and just sidetrack ever so slightly. It is, for me personally, like, I care about raid comps. I really do. Even if I'm a raider, or if I'm a raid leader, whatever. It doesn't matter where I am on the scale. I care about I really care, right? I can't help myself. Like, if I would be forced to play Red now and I didn't have Wind Fury, I would probably be poking a raid leader or something. Yo, dude, there's no Wind Fury. Like, what? Dude, I'm not gonna play without Wind Fury. Stuff like that. Whereas if you look at Wrath, it's, in my opinion, it's less toxic. Why I say toxic? Because everyone cares nowadays, right? We're all pretty much very well educated in terms of rating and what's good and what's bad. And most melee know, hey, I have no Wind Fury, what's going on, right? Like a rogue has no Wind Fury, he's like, yo, what up? Like a warrior, no Wind Fury, hey, what's going on, dude? You expect me to raid like this? So people have expectations. And it's kind of nasty because the moment that Wind Fury totem does not have 100% uptime, that shaman is going to have a miserable experience, right? All the rogues, paladins, warriors are sliding in the pink and they're whispering to poor shaman, yo, Wind Fury, yo, what up, dude? Hey, are you asleep? What are you doing? Hey, where's the Wind Fury? They're like fucking harassing the poor dude. And it's on all levels of play, right? I'm not like, maybe if you're pushing for a server first, or you want to be a top 5 guild on a server, on a popular server or something like that, maybe, that kind of behavior could be excused, right? Because if you're super competitive, you might bump your elbows a little bit more. But here is the deal. It trickles all the way down to, your dad guild that just raids on the weekend. And there's a poor dude that just wants to spam his chain heals, and he's like, Wind Fury is like, okay, guys, wait. Oh, you want me to totem twist now as well? Oh my god, right? And in Wrath, you don't care about it. As long as you have 20% haste, right? That's the biggest deal about it. And even the best part about it, the easiest way to get the 20% haste is from a DK, rather than an enhancement shaman, especially like in tier 7 where they struggle a little bit with talent points early because they have to sacrifice a little bit of talent points to get the improved Wind Fury. But yeah, I mean, like, if we could raid TBC with Wrath talents and the set encounters were actually optimized to be hard, like buffed, That would be so amazing, man. That would be so pog. Because the raids themselves, I don't know if you remember, but like even Tempest Keep is so amazing. It's just so nice. Aesthetics, even Kiltas fight is amazing. Hyjal is just so amazing as well. People don't like trash, but why don't people like trash? Because rogues have no AoE, for example. They can't pitch in. Now, if you gave rogues Fan of Knives, which obviously is not, historically, it's not the broken spell, right? It's not like Fan of Knives is gonna, I don't know, be so potent that you will never bring any other class to the game. Maybe they would have a better time as well. Maybe you wouldn't need to stack so many warlocks. Because what people are doing right now, obviously, seed stack or mages, flame strike, then down like flame strike, and stuff like that. So I think if a server manages to do that, and that there is a server that's going to do that, if a server actually manages to pull that off, that is a unique opportunity to have really fun content that has never been experienced like that before. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at where we are now too, with everything that's going on. Well, I'm sure we're going to get into that as well with TBC now versus TBC then, and we got it on the schedule today to kind of talk about it, the changes we're looking at, and I've been kind of getting into some of the changes now that are going on, and it's wow, the difference between old TBC to now, and then you talk about the changes. One of the main changes I remember too, you talk about AoE. Shamans never really had an AoE, not until the 4.0 patch came out in Wrath, for example.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
when they had I forget the exact name of it, but it did the animation Earthquake. I think it was
yeah. Yep. And here's the deal. Not every shaman took that, because like they would just not bother with it. Sometimes, like for the actual mass AoE, Earthquake was considered DPS downgrade. So what would end up happening is, in the really pushy guilds, they would just let the elemental chain lightning and lightning bolt, and others would pick it up, like Serpent Spread from a hunter, or heck, even like Blade Storm, which technically is Whirlwind now. It counts as Whirlwind, but let's not get into nitty gritty on that. But yeah, like even when they did get AoE, on some patches it's killed so badly they didn't even skip the freaking talent, man.
Yeah, it's totally different. We're talking about TBC. Wow. I just now, going back, I just started playing it the other day. Just picked it up because, I'm looking forward to Wrath. Obviously, that's clearly where my focus is always going to be. But just going back now and just playing it, and I'm like, wow, like something like Feral. Feral's just, I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
With Mangle only lasts what, like 12 seconds or something like that,
Yeah.
with the bleed values, and you're so used to Wrath where it lasts, a minute, and you're like, wow, how the hell did we ever play this? What were they thinking when they did this? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. That was also one of the discussions I had something like several months ago. We had a feral DPS who was like, hey, I kind of need a feral tank to keep that Mangle up for me if you want me to parse. And I'm like, yeah, I know, buddy. Just, do your best. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And I would just like to add this. I think Wrath of the Lich King is the perfect middle of World of Warcraft.
Oh, so do I. Yeah, 100%.
Like, it is, the classes feel good. You don't feel like, you're just some ruffian out there with some weird rotation / specialization. Everything really feels good, right? And here's the thing. I think for most of us veterans, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't really want to spend, 2 weeks leveling with a broken, disgusting rotation. Let me reiterate, like, imagine vanilla warriors, right? Most of them feel so bad to level, right? Like, it's just a brutal, grindy experience. You pull 3 mobs, you get the parry miss and a dodge, they crit you 2 or 3 times, and you're in a super bad spot, right? One. You don't also really have any cooldowns besides maybe your AoE fear. And even then, you pop an AoE fear, and there's another straggler that gets pulled, and you just die. That happens to you a couple of times, and you're already having a bad experience to the point where you might not even want to log in for the day anymore, right? So,
Well, not only that, but look at the the leveling changes when we're talking about, from TBC to they fixed a few things in TBC as far as making leveling easier 1 through 60. But man, you talk about, because you look back at vanilla, we talked about it the other day, Joker D, when he was pushing his
yeah.
or not realm first, but world first 60.
Mm-hmm.
What'd he do? He just pulled trash and just nuked it down. Now that they kind of got away from that in Wrath, thank God, and they made questing more worth your while to go do these quests, um, versus just pulling trash packs and nuking them down. They fixed so much, even with the leveling stuff. You got BOA gear that you could give your character. I know some people hated that. They'd rather you just level normally, quit buying this BOA gear and giving it to your character. But it made they encouraged you to level, because nobody likes to level. We all hate leveling. It's boring. It's stupid. And not unless you're really into some role playing, I guess. Would it be kind of fun? To me, it's the most boringest thing in the whole entire world. I hate it. It's excruciating. Doing it now is excruciating in TBC. But man, the changes they made in Wrath were just a lot more quality of life. Things that should have been implemented a long time ago. At least for me, when I look back at vanilla playing it, leveling it, and TBC playing it, leveling. I don't know how you feel about that, but
Here's the deal. I personally think leveling is for the newcomers, or for those who haven't played the game for a while. Like look at classic vanilla, look at classic TBC. Just let's take a moment and actually talk about what happens. I think this topic, for the first episode might be a little bit too much, but I just want to cover it briefly. A lot of people enjoyed leveling in classic vanilla, but why did they enjoy it? Because they came back to the game. No one played classic vanilla in its proper version for God knows how long, right? Even 1.12, guys. 1.12 servers are really fucking bad when it comes to actual client optimization. Mind you, that client is from what, at best 2006, right? You're in 2022. Like, good luck having your GPU running that smoothly on 144 hertz monitor. Like, really good luck. I experienced that myself. 2.4.3 client as well. It doesn't feel good. Then you get the Wrath client. You're like, okay, now I'm finally getting the performance you want. And of course, you play private server Kada, you get even more performance. I'm playing a mop. Mop runs just beautifully. Like, mop runs, I think it's DirectX 12. It could be DirectX 11, right? But there's so many things that come into play. It's not just like nostalgia. It's like, if you really wanted to play private servers, like I played on Turtle WoW a little bit, right? Well, I did play on Elysium as well, but I don't mention those things because it was like, hey, I'm gonna like dump 2 weeks into this and play here. Like, I didn't do anything noteworthy. I didn't reach end game in the raid, didn't kill any bosses, stuff like that. That's why I don't mention those servers. But those servers they just ended up being really laggy and felt really bad because of the client, and it has nothing to do with the devs, right? For example, Endless TBC was an amazing server in terms of ideas, in terms of what they introduced, what they implemented. They implemented not just dual spec, they implemented triple spec, right? Amazing concept, but it lagged, right? And so a lot of people, when I say lag, performance was not there. So that was like not really, fun for a lot of people, the fact that the clients were not good. So a lot of people came back to classic vanilla and they were like, hey, look at this, we're on BFA now, Shadowlands client, it runs so smooth, and they enjoyed leveling. And then classic TBC came out, and all of a sudden everyone was boosting. Even in classic vanilla, more than boosts. I don't know if you were aware of that or not. Mages, the whole thing, the 300 plus mob pool, that was a massive thing because people wanted to have alts, right? Mages boosting mana was insane. And then look at TBC. Like, I myself did over 600 Stratholm runs boosting people. because you can enter that on level 45 and you can stay there. Even if you want it, you can stay there until 63. For anyone that's listening, guys, you hit level 58 and you want to get boosted in slave pens, don't do it. You get more XP per gold if you stay in that strat home, by the way. I'm not kidding. Yes, slave pens give you more XP, but those mages are pulling only, 60 mobs? Whereas, and it takes them, like 15, 20 minutes, whereas the paladin does it faster and they pull more, right? So from an experience booster, for anyone that's listening, if you actually want to get the best value, stay in Stratholme until like 61 and then like maybe go questing yourself. But yeah, a lot of people buy boosts because they don't want to level. And if you like leveling, if you're a person that really enjoys the leveling content, that's fine and dandy. No one has anything against you. Level away, go for it. For all I care, buy 10 different World of Warcraft accounts and level 100 characters. But the the majority of players currently playing don't really care about leveling, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but the best way we could level is maybe even times 10. Queue for a dungeon, get some gear, and immediately press Q, you will go to a different dungeon, right? I think that would be like the best leveling experience we could have, no?
I know some people hate me for saying this, but it's why you look at the private server scene. What servers are more played? The 7x, the 10x servers, or the 1x ones? All these people push, we want 1x, we want 1x. No, you don't. The majority does not want 1x.
Yeah, that's the truth. That's the truth. Like, no one. We all have done that. God knows how many times, right? Right. There's also people who are saying, "Well, I haven't done it." I'm sure. I mean, you'll do it once, and after that, you're kind of done, really. And if anything, you get more gold if you do decide. If you care about story, like let's say Ice Crown and Storm Peaks, and you want to do quests there, actually it's better to do it when you're max level, because that way you get even more gold, right?
Well, it's easy, yeah. And then you're talking about killing mobs, and you're never going to, even when you hit 70, or 80 rather, in Wrath, and you're out there in Storm Peaks, and you're not going to be, you're already going to be level 80. Like, you're not going to be going out there, and you'll go out there for maybe 2 or 3 levels, and that'll be about it. And there's going to be, and you still have Storm Peaks and Ice Crown to level in, and you need quests in both. There's dailies you got to unlock in Ice Crown, dailies you got to unlock in Storm Peaks. So there's a ton of content once you hit 80 to go back out there and farm all that gear as well. Well, and to do all the, unlock all the dailies.
Yeah. Like Hodier chain quest is going to take you at least 2 hours. Or something like that, right?
Not to mention, just to get to Revered is going to take you however long, couple weeks, maybe a month or something like that to get up to Revered.
Yeah. Also, for anyone that actually listens and cares, Scryer Exalted, Aldor Exalted, Shoulder Enchants, keep some of those tokens, guys. You're going to need it. You don't want to, be the guy who doesn't have enchanted shoulders. Those are not that bad, okay? For tier 7, you can still use those. And if you're fresh and you don't have any of those, you can use the Stonekeeper shards in Winter Grasp for a PvP shoulder enchant. The only thing you lose is crit. I think crit and MP5, right? The secondary stat. It has 2 stats. First one being AP, the second one being SP, attack power and spell power. That is the same compared to Hodier. Just the second part is, I think, crit and MP5, if I'm correct, right? You lose that one, but oh my god, like, if you wipe because you're missing, like, something like 0.5% crit, then, I think you have bigger issues on your hand. That's, like, a nifty trick, I would say. I almost did it on every fresh character that didn't provide instant Hodier Exalted, which Warming does, by the way. So props to them for that. On Frostmourne. But, Funky, let's transition a little bit. You are, maybe fail on my end, you are a massive big brain druid player. The biggest of the brains. The galaxy brain druid player.
I wouldn't go that far, but I've been playing it a long time, theory crafting it, etc. So I think I have a pretty good grasp on it, yeah.
Yeah. I think you're being a little bit of modest, but that's a good trait anyway. I will hype you up. It is my duty and my obligation to say how it is. Let me ask this. How did you get into Druid, specifically Resto? Because that's your trademark, right? That Resto Druid, that's your home run. That's your, that's your quarter mile run. How did you get into Resto Druid specifically?
That's a great question. So this goes harkens, but we'll go back to TBC for this. So in TBC, if you guys know, one of the hardest comps to play against was Warrior Restoration Druid, because you'd have that Druid who would just pillar hump the shit out of everything, and it was so annoying. And so when I started playing Wrath, I had a buddy of mine, and he told me, he's like, dude, Warrior sucks. You're gonna want to play DK. So I ended up starting playing a Death Knight, and DKs, and we can get all into all that. DK Paladin being overpowered in season 5, but I was like, man, what is that one thing that I always struggle killing? And it was a Restoration Druid, and I couldn't kill these bastards all the time. They were just annoying as all get out. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna roll one. I'm gonna play Restoration Druid, and I had my Funky Music was actually I had played it a little bit in TBC. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start fresh. Left the guild I was in, stopped doing PvP, totally went for Restoration Druid, and got him leveled up, got him geared, and went from there, honestly. And then that went into TOC, ICC with him. And then I started parsing these logs, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing, back in TOC. This is what I'm thinking and figuring this stuff out in my head. This is when I was first turned on to Elitist Jerks. If any of you guys remember the old Elitist Jerks website, was basically theory crafting website where you could come give your information, your tests. Let's say if people were running logs, they'd theory craft all this stuff out. So I really got into that at that point in time. And when it came to ICC, I think that's where if you go back and read the Elitist Jerk stuff, the math on it is 100% still correct. But there's a lot of things in there that I disagreed with as far in terms of, what gems you should use, what enchants you should use, best in slot for this or that, etc., etc. And it never really got sussed out because everyone was moving on to patch 4.0. Real quick, not to get off on a wild tangent here, but people do forget that Ice Crown Citadel was out for almost a year. We had never seen a raid out for that long at that time,
Yeah.
And it was, so you had a lot more time to theory craft, a lot more time to figure all these things out. And I think a lot of people got burnt out on it. And my guild personally, we had a lot of people quit. They're like, you know what? I'm just going to come back for Kata. I've already killed Lich King. They didn't want to do anything else. Halion was kind of an afterthought, and we really didn't mess with it a whole lot. We did kill it, but never really put it on farm, so to speak. So yeah, that's when I started really parsing these logs. I was doing well in my parses, figuring things out, and theory crafting this stuff. That's, I don't know, to me that's where I truly figured it out, and that's how I started really playing a Restoration Druid, because they were annoying as hell going against him in PvP. And yeah, that's what happened with me. What about you talk about, you're mostly playing what, Paladin and Ret, right?
Well, Prot and Ret. Prot and
So what
Ret
got you into that?
Well, as I said, I played a bunch of Holy. I even PvP'd as Holy. I PvP'd as Red, PvP'd as Holy. PvE and PvP is both of those specs back in Wrath of the Lich King. And I never really dabbed in Prot, and the only tanking I ever did was like, okay, fine, I'll hold threat and move the boss and do the mechanics. But I never really had the itch. I really never had the urge to really play a tank. Naturally, as my character goes, if I'm going to play a tank, I'm going to be a main tank. Now, here's the deal. What really made me play Prot was just the awful garbage tanks that I encountered during my play on vanilla servers. Now, for those that don't know, if you're main tank is trash, your whole raid is trash. Let me explain. Before people think I'm dissing something like that. Even in the most casual guild, your best player needs to be the main tank in vanilla. Why? Because the DPS is gonna plateau where his threat is. Okay, whatever this guy's TPS is, that's your raid's DPS, right? Minus 1%, if you want to get technical about it, right? Of course, you have rogues who have Vanish and Feint, but you have other classes who don't have that, right? You have other classes that get threat capped super fast. And that's specifically DPS warriors. And that's like what really rustled my jimmies, for the better lack of term. I'm like, yo, I want to be a tank. But at that time, I was like, I think I'm done with vanilla. And it's time for me to go back to something that I really, really vibe with. And Frostmourne 1 launched at that time, height of pandemic, height of corona lockdowns, no one is going anywhere, Frostmourne is fresh, and I'm like, yo, I get to play this with Legion models and with all of the add-ons available, details, DBM, bartenders, tidy plates, MSBTs with custom phones because Porky is garbage, and fuck you all before doing that. And there's so many things, right? You have all of these add-ons, you have so much, and I just went into it and I'm like, yo, I'm gonna be prod and I'm gonna run this show, right? And what I also really like is you're pretty much a director as a tank, right? If you're confident, if you know the raid layout, even dungeon layout, doesn't matter, whatever content you're doing, if you're confident and competent, you know your math, right? You know your match, you know how to optimize your character, you know your rotations, you're comfortable at playing, you've done everything right. The raid feels completely different, right? It feels completely different. Now, not to toot my own horn, there have been cases where I've switched to red, I would let a different tank pick up, I would push them, hey, do this, do that, you need to tank like this, position like this. 2 weeks would pass by, aka four raiding lockouts, and I would already get whispers, hey, Fark, go back to prod, what are you doing? Why are you playing red? Fuck off, go back to prod. And it's like, what motivates me really is to do things as clean as possible and the best way possible to position the bosses in such way where raid can just pop the freaking toots off and just smash the bosses, and I really like that. And also, personal challenge of mine is, whenever I can, out DPS the DPS as a tank. Now, I'm not using DPS gear, don't think I'm insane, but I really like it when I have certain boss fights where I just pop off like never before, when I'm like pumping 7k, 8k DPS, of course with Seal of Command, I'm just smashing it, and I just love that. I just love pushing the prot to the very, very maximum that it can be pushed for. And also, what I really love besides playing prot is the sea of theory crafting and min-maxing you have in terms of gear and talent optimization, right? Also, foreshadowing a little bit here, if you're using Warcraft Tavern, I'm sorry, stop it. Stop it. Get some help. Stop it. Don't do that. I'm currently in a guild. I had to have a discussion last night in Discord where people were telling me, hey, Fark, this is not your BIS. And I'm like, guys, where are you getting your BIS lists? Because block rating and block value is very much needed for Anubarak 25 Heroic. You're not going to be tanking any ads without the block set. I need these items. This is going to cost me. This is going to hurt me a lot. And then someone says, oh, but, Warrior can do it. Yeah, but does Warrior have Holy Wrath? And there's stuff like that, right? Yeah, sure, they have Shockwave, but ideally, Paladin does it better because they have just that much better AoE threat and AoE DPS through Seal of Command. They just outperform Warrior, in my opinion, on that fight, which is like super important. If you're going through patches, you really want Paladin for TOC to be geared. So yeah, like there's just so much, man, when it comes to like min-maxing your gear, like Anubarak on this server has increased movement speed. I can use this jewel crafting trinket plus 1 potion so I can solo tank Anubarak and stuff like that. There's so much you can do. You know, those like, even on those quote unquote irrelevant bosses, if you're cognizant and if you have experience, you can innovate to the point where like it really makes you stand out. And that's what I really, really love about playing Prot Paladin. It's like the whole package is like, what do you do outside of the raid? Your preparation and then your execution both really, really matter. It's not just one thing, right? It's the whole package, whereas it could be said for everyone else, right? Of course, every class, you know, yourself, you stand in Dalaran, in Orgrimmar, you're okay, how much, what's my haste cap? How much haste do I need? But I would beg to differ that there's a little bit more depth when it comes to playing a tank, you know, thinking, what should be my Algalon tanking set versus what should be my, I don't know, what should be my XT tanking set, right? There is a little bit more, it's a little bit more different, I would say, just because the rainbow of options is just bigger and more colorful.
No, it's the same thing when I look at Resto Druid. Now, I'm sure we'll get into this in another podcast, but just to touch on it real quick, it's like, for me, it's Restoration Druid. When I look at, and this goes for almost any healer class too, when you look at it, you have to choose which healer you're going to use given that situation you're presented with. You know, and the great thing about Restoration Druid, I know they take a lot of flack. People will say they're not as good, they're not blah, blah, blah. I think the reason why they get such a bad rap, and the same thing with a holy priest in Wrath, is the simple fact that you have to think 2 steps ahead. There's a lot more thought that goes into it, whereas other healers are more reactionary, or they're just, you know, like we talked about, like you mentioned earlier, where, you know, holy paladins only got, you know, basically 2 spells. You're going to use holy shock on the move, holy light when you're not moving, and keep beacon up, you know, and judge every 1 minute. It's not like it's a hard class to play, whereas Restoration Druid, you got to think 2 steps ahead. Okay, this boss is getting ready to cast this, or this damage is about ready to hit. I need to stop spamming on the tank. For example, like Festergut's a great example where he has a phase where it's AoE, then he'll go to where he's just slapping your tank to death, and then he goes back to AoE. You have to preemptively think about that and get ready to start raid healing so you can get ready for, you know, that phase of the fight and stop doing so much tank healing. It's a lot more complicated when it comes to those classes that are least used. I think there's still, you know, at least in Restoration Druid terms, they're still viable. I think that the skill gap in there, like you were kind of talking about with Paladins, knowing what to use, the skill gap in between some of these players who just mindlessly will spam Wild Growth and Rejuvenation in a Restoration Druid's case, versus those who will, oh, my tank's going to be taking damage here in about half a second. I'm going to regrowth him so I can, if I need to, I can have a hot on him ready to be nourished or swift mended. That, you know, the raid healing, that 1 extra rejuvenation I'm going to get off on this guy over here isn't going to be as powerful or as needed versus that regrowth or whatever you're putting on the tank at the time. So it's a mental thing for me. It really is playing your class and knowing, not only having the knowledge, these BIS lists that are out there. You touched on it about, you know, Warcraft Tavern being terrible, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, you had a whole video of your own on that topic. Maybe, you know, we should cover it on a different podcast, because I think you know, they rebranded. But yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. For me, it's a mental thing when it comes to playing a lot of these classes. But not to get too far ahead here, but you know, I see we were going to talk about this Blizzard post about the changes in Black Temple and what they're doing, and I kind of wanted to touch on this because me and a couple of the guys in the Discord, we've been talking about, well, what are the changes going to bring for Wrath, and it's interesting to watch and see some of the stuff that they're doing in TBC and how that could possibly translate into what they plan on changing or not changing in Wrath of the Lich King. So I don't know if we wanted to talk about that real quick, or
yeah, absolutely. No, I'll let you mentioned that you talked with others on Discord, and here's the interesting thing. I kind of want to hear about that, to be honest. I kind of wonder, like, because you have, so to speak, the ear on the ground, right, with other veterans. You know, maybe they don't consider themselves to be veterans, but they are veterans. You know, even if you play for more than a year on even on Icecrown, you're somewhat of a veteran simply because the meta, the environment forces you to be one. So I kind of wonder, what do you have to say there, really? Like, what do other people think? Where do you stand on it? And what's kind of the consensus on it, really?
Right now, from what I mean, granted, there's no private server that's 100% scripted, so we're going off that information. I mean, Teamy has, and we'll get into. I'm sure I'll talk quite a bit about him. He's the mathematical genius. He knows all that stuff. But like for his restoration shaman guide that he's put out, he's gone from basically the values and how they change throughout each tier 7, tier 8, tier 9, tier 10. And you know, I was like, well, what if they change something? Is this going to mean we're going to have to redo our guides completely? And he's like, yo, I'm just going off of what they had back in the day on Blizzard, and that's kind of where we're basing things right now when it comes to the theory crafting portion of stuff, because a lot of these guides that you see out there, a lot of the videos we've seen, you and I have talked about it, these DPS tier lists that we keep running into on YouTube, it could all be for naught. I mean, this goes even for our guide. So we're kind of just playing it safe, I guess you could say right now, and kind of just we're basing what we see we're basing everything off of what it was back in the day. And if any changes or something like that comes up, I guess we'll have to deal with it when it comes up. But until we know, we're kind of just basing it not so much off the private server side of things of how they work. Like I said, a lot of these private servers are not scripted 100% correctly. So we're more focused on trying to figure out how things worked, et cetera, back in the day. But at the same time, you got to take, the fact that they're probably going to release everything at endgame patch 3.3.5. So private servers do give us a better testing bed for that, I guess. So we're trying to take what we've learned from private servers and them starting off at endgame patch, and we're trying to implement that with how things should work mathematically, according to the old Wrath retail. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, no, I get you when you say that you want to play it safe, because certain things are different, vastly different. And here's my first and easiest argument covering that. Anubrikan, probably the first boss you're going to do, most likely. You can do any boss first that you want. You can do Patchwork first, but traditionally, historically, you do Spidering first. A lot of these people are making guides about Anubrikan in mind that he is going to use the scripting that is on Synergy, aka Whitemane, aka Sindragosa. Now here's the thing, guys. You need to kite 2 full circles around the room during the Locust Swarm phase, right? And that's what everyone, they're just doing it week in, week out. They've been doing it for 3 months now, or something like that. I'm generous, too. Let's say 2 months. And they've done it with their alts, because everyone's alting there. And they think, okay, yeah, no, this is a way. Hold your horses, guys. What's the actual Blizzard scripting? Anubrikan, you kited only halfway. That means you counted from 12 to 6, half of the room, right? You just do half of the circle, right? Imagine you have a circle, right? You have a pie. You go from 12 to 6, from north point to the south point. Now, what does that mean, right? What is that going to mean for Blizzard scripting? Well, first of all, that means your melee automatically becomes more valuable because their uptime is going to be increased, right? Your melee is not just going to AFK there, as they have to on current Synergy. These people are talking about, right? Oh, melee sucks. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying melee is going to be amazing, but there are levels to this, right? There are really levels to this. Even if you're going to have, imagine this, you're going to have a ranged heavy comp and you have a couple of melee. All of a sudden, what you can do is you can assign that couple of melee you have on the ad. That ad gets pulled to a noob after Locust Swarm ends. During Locust Swarm, all of your range was in the boss anyway, and all of a sudden, all of the melee switches to the boss, while the ad, probably dead, who knows, probably alive if it's like super early into the tier. And now they get to pad even more because they get the cleaves, they get their consecrations, divine storms, whatever, right? They get all of the cleaves up on that target, and even after that, when the ad dies, the swarm, the small ads that explode from the ad. You get to pad on those and get increased uptime on the boss and even more damage that way. That completely changes the perspective on how good is a certain class. Let's talk about Red Paladin here, right? Imagine that. Imagine like not seal twisting, but seal changing. Right? Imagine getting a couple of Divine Storms on those Scarabs, or even having SOC up early. You're just popping the frick off. You're popping the frick off. You're doing insane amount of DPS. You're going well over 10k, right? With Bloodlust, with the pot. Depends what trinket you have. You have a greatness proc. You're demolishing, right? And all of a sudden, oh wait, but my tier list said that. Oh no, this person made a tier list and said that Rhetoric is absolute garbage until ICC. It depends on the scripting of the fight, right? It absolutely depends on the scripting of the fight, and that's what a lot of people don't remember. Or I would say, here is my opinion. This is controversial take, but unless you have thoroughly rated on Warmane, I don't think you should be making any freaking guides about fucking Wrath of the Lich King. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality of it.
No, and not to cut you off real quick, but the reason for that is a lot of these, like you were talking about, a lot of these servers have custom scripting, and you look at Lordaeron on Warmane, you look at Frostmourne on Warmane, for example, and a lot of these other servers, like you're talking about Whitemane, they increase HP buffs, they changed boss damage, they change all this stuff. The only server out there, oddly enough, that's actually the closest thing to Blizzard scripts is Icecrown, because everything is just like it was, minus things obviously on private servers, a thing here or two there being broken, but as far as the XP rates are higher, but as far as boss scripting goes, it's exactly the same as it was in retail. So not to cut you off there, but I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, 100%. Put my signature underneath that statement, and that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. Is there's this custom scripting that people really don't have in the back of their mind, and I really want to touch upon that. And let's talk maybe episode 2, episode 3. Here's also in a sneak preview. For horsemen, you get 4 marks from the horseman, you insta die. Well, as a tank you don't, but that's besides the point. Your rate dies, right? Whereas actual scripting is you take increased damage. Now, should you go, double digit debuff on that fight? No, you shouldn't, most definitely not. But here's the deal. If you don't have the DPS to kill the first horseman with Bloodlust and pre-pot spots, people still use chicken, which is cringe, but whatever. If you don't have the DPS to kill it, you wipe, because now you have to do the swap tactic, and then the meteor damage is buffed through the freaking roof, where it does ungodly amount of damage. Look at Blizzard scripting, guys. The fight is easy. It is so easy. It is so painfully easy, right? It is like... It's literally loot pinata, right? There's nothing there that's gonna challenge anyone. I would even debate the Saffron as well, right? What is there to challenge us? And here is maybe to come back and step back a little bit. What you opened with, what we kind of prepared for today to be a segment on the podcast, and that's Blizzard said they're launching Black Temple as it is, right? They're not touching Black Temple, and in my opinion, that's huge, right? That's huge. Now let's freeze the situation for a moment, and let's look at the timeline. Vanilla launches, everything launches as it is. There are no buffs, there are no nerfs. Not that we know of, really. They haven't really buffed or nerfed bosses. There have been some fixes, really, but nothing of great magnitude, right? Nothing has been really probed or poked with. Then you get TBC. Okay, we're getting some buffs and some nerfs, like Nightbane. Inkara was drastically nerfed once Tier 5 launched. Now Tier 5 is drastically nerfed with Tier 6 launch. But they said for Tier 6, when I say nerf, it's post-nerf, pre-nerf. It's the mechanics, right? And here's the deal. Black Temple isn't touched. And that is a massive concern, because that is going to be streamrolled through. Even back in the day, Black Temple, a lot of guilds managed to clear even upwards of half of Black Temple that were considered casual or relatively bad, right? With rosters that had barely any min maxing, besides, here are your tanks, here are your healers, and here's your DPS. Getting into the details, really fleshing it out, and it's such a thing, right? Even those guilds cleared like 2 bosses in Hyjal and 4 bosses in Black Temple. And if they're not buffing Black Temple now, what's the reasoning behind it? Why are you not buffing it? And I think the reason is because the player base really wants easy content, right? That's what they want. But here's my concern. My personal concern is Naxx is going to be so boring. We're going to be literally puking our intestines out. This is like my concern. The only challenging fight that there is realistically is maybe Saffron, right? And that's because people fail mechanics. Once again, look at Saffron on Synergy. Like, Ice Tombs come down, it's the same as, literally same as Sindragosa, right? Not the Ice Tomb itself, the way you attack it and the size of it, but the effect, the way it spreads to players is the same, right? You're supposed to spread. What do you do on Synergy? Well, you just zug it. You don't care. Melee stacks and they're just zugging it until the very last second when the Frost Bomb drops, right? Like, a lot of people don't remember, guys. You're gonna freeze half of the freaking raid. You're gonna get absolutely demolished. You're gonna have 10 people in Ice Tombs. Who's gonna heal that? Unless you had Hots and Shields beforehand, you're not surviving that. What, you're gonna do a DSAC and an Aura Mastery there? Okay, good. But like, you're still not supposed to survive that. So once again, except Saffron, I don't see any difficult bosses that pose threat. I mean, Kel'Thuzad as well. The only way it can be difficult is if people derp, right? You stand in the void zone, you die. Well, that's your fault.
Red circle, yep.
Yeah, that's your fault. I don't know. Melee, like, completely mispositions themselves, sorry. And they get Frost Tomb on like 10 players. Well, then again, that's the positioning issue. No, that's just a part of the mechanic. But once you get that down, right? Once you get that down, once you have mechanics down, what is there? Like, what kind of HP are we looking at, right? Kel'Thuzad is not going to be challenging. OS 3D as well. It's going to be kind of a little bit tricky. But once people learn that, nuke the Drake, and that's it, and dodge the firewall, it's going to be relatively easy, right? So this was my concern, is that Tier 7 is going to be painfully boring, and until Yogg and Algalon, we won't have any challenges, like specifically Algalon 10, man. I
I 100% agree with that comment. People don't understand the talent changes that happened from 3.0 3.3.5. Now, some of those changes, like we've discussed before, do hurt some classes, but it buffs the ever-living daylights out of some of these other classes out there. That's going to more than make up for the losses that some of these classes are going to receive. Like, for example, the changes to Gift of the Earth Mother for Restoration Druid with the haste loss of 10% from 3.3.5 or 3.3 to 3.0. It's not going to be that big of a loss, considering you could there's ways around it. But yeah, when you're talking about as far as challenge goes, and then not only that, you think about Naxx is going to be blown through. Okay. Yeah. I don't even know if I'm even going to bother rating Naxx, to be honest with you, until maybe towards the end, just to get geared up for, Udallar. But yeah, until Yogg Zero Light, Algalon, yeah, kind of, sort of. Like you said, 10 man, yeah. I don't think so much in 25 man, but Firefighter maybe can be kind of difficult at times. I guess that would be the only other fight. All the rest of them, Thorum maybe, and I say that's only on heroic mode or hard mode rather. But after that, you're talking even a Nubarak in TOC, which, by the way, I can't wait till we talk about TOC, because that is it's going to be funny to talk about that.
Yeah, we can touch upon it.
How are they going to sit there at endgame? Let's assuming however long that these phases are going to last, how long they really going to let TOC sit out for? Anything over 3 months is probably just gonna kill players because they're gonna be bored to death of doing TOC. But yeah, like you said, the strategy you're talking about for SAF, it's the same thing when you look at Syndergosa, and I have a video on this actually, doing it the old way on the way that we did it back in retail versus now is now you see people doing the burn strategy, which is fine if you have the DPS for it. Like you're saying with SAF, if you've got the DPS, you got people that are hardcore. Yeah, you can probably get away with doing that tactic. And it's the same thing for later tiers in Ice Crown Citadel. But there's more safer, easier ways to do some of this stuff. I think people are kind of ignoring that. Like, again, it harkens back to what you said about SAF, where you're not going to have half your raid tombed. That's ridiculous. Not unless you're like pushing for that last, 3% or 2% damage on SAF. Would that be acceptable? And the same thing goes for later tiers on Syndergosa. There's easier ways to get around this stuff that I don't know. I think that's one of my worries when we go and start playing this content is some people are going to be doing really goofy strategies that don't need to be done. There's easier ways to get around it. And I think the only problem with that is some of these dad guilds, and I'm included in that because I'm ancient, they might struggle doing some of this, trying to do these burn tactics and things like that. And they might get stuck on it, so to speak. But at the same point, like I said at the beginning of this rant, DPS, there's certain DPS classes that are just going to completely melt face compared to what they were doing back in patch 3.0 when this was retail.
Oh yeah, 100%. Million percent. But here's the thing. I think certain things should be a struggle. There should be a little bit of reward at the end. You want to have that carrot and stick, right? You don't want to just breeze through things, just have the utmost easiest loot pinata. You want to have a little bit of a challenge so that it feels meaningful. So I think the issue with Blizzard is they only have one version of BT and they're playing it safe, right? They have one version of Black Temple, one version of Mount Hyjal, and they're like, yo, let's make sure that these guys are killing stuff rather than viping, because there's a lot of stuff that happened in tier 5 and I was also part of that left a sour taste in people's mouth. And it was really the constant viping, but it has nothing to do. Here's the issue. It has nothing to do with the game. It has everything to do with the player base. I think we live, or rather play during the times where World of Warcraft is not what it used to be in the slightest. It's a shadow of its former self, sad to say.
100%.
Not blasting anyone there. If you were watching my stream when I was raid leading on Faralina, we wiped on Solarian so many times. Why? Just because people don't understand things. People would tell me, Fark, you need to do healing assignments. And I would constantly fight back and forth. Guys, it's the strategy. There are no mechanics. There is only one mechanic there, and that is if you get the debuff, move to the off tank, and that's it. Well, the soaking tank, the resistance tank, right? Besides that, it is your healing plates. Why is there a need for a healing assignment? Why does a raid leader need to assign a holy paladin to heal a tank and or a person with a debuff? It should be the default go-to, right? Why does the raid leader need to explain that if you have tanks who have high stacks of debuff, that maybe chain healing those two set tanks might be a good idea? And that this is what really grinds my gears. There's a lot of expectation and preparation. Raid leaders should do that. I think back in the day, I don't think we had healing assignments to this point. Like, sure, hey, you should kind of be doing that, but it was like after a certain time it was expected, right? Okay, you can maybe, as you said, okay, I will throw regrowth on a tank and I'm gonna swift man, like, for just an example, right, that you mentioned. But like, you're not gonna be expected to out heal a freaking holy paladin when it comes to single target tank healing, right? The same way no one is going to expect a holy paladin to out heal you when it comes to raid healing. And I think there is a massive lack of understanding the principal core roles of the classes and specs in the raiding scene that I have experienced in TBC. I think The issue is that we have, what, 300k active players? Let me just pull the numbers really quick. Ironforge Pro TBC player base. Like, let me just see. Like, currently on Ironforge Pro, it says that we have, on TBC Classic, we have just almost 300k players. Characters, right? This is not even unique accounts. We have 300,000 characters that have been logged in PvE logs and or arena, right? And that, begs the question: how many of them are alts?
Right. And not only that, but go ahead. We're gonna get into it. Go ahead.
And then here's my thing: if let's say, let's half that. Let's be generous. Let's half that. Now, mind you, there could be people leveling. There could be people not logging. But let's be real. If you're not logging, if you're a leveler, then you don't really care about certain raid scripting anyway, right? You might just do it at a later point of time, so it doesn't affect those people anyway. So for the current discussion, they're not relevant, right? So let's half that number, and let's say everyone has an alt, right, that has been logged. I have 4 characters, so I can say 4 characters of mine have been logged there. So what does it mean? We have 150,000 players on TBC currently.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, get to that point, is not to toot my own horn for this, but I mentioned this when Classic first launched, and when they came out with that you remember that TBC questionnaire they came out with right before they launched TBC?
Yeah.
So having read that myself and gone over it, I kind of gave my comments on it, and you look at the TBC private server scene. Now, I'm not saying that is funky. That's that's going to translate into how many. That's not accurate. More people will come because Blizzard has the marketing and they can get more people to come and play. Maybe you're bored of retail and you want to go play some Classic. Sure, I get that 100%. But TBC on private servers was never a major thing. Whereas Vanilla had Nostalrius, they had Light's Hope. And Wrath has. There's always one other server besides Warmane that's really, right now it seems to be Whitemane doing the
Synergy.
Where everyone seems to be playing at. And you look at Warmane, which is huge. There's never been that for TBC.
So
and
let me interrupt you for a second. Humongous. Okay, I think when you said huge, I just want to interrupt you here for a second. I apologize for that. Warmane is absolutely humongous. It's the mecca for Wrath of the Lich King, right? It is the biggest mega server with, God, like, how many characters would you guess? 100k characters at least. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. For those who don't know, it's absolutely insanely huge. Okay.
And you go back, well, even that, you look at WoW Circle. WoW Circle's got they're Russian mostly, and look how many thousands of people are playing on that server. I'd say I forgot about them. They're probably the one that would rival Warmane, but it is pretty much Russian only. That's the only drawback, where Warmane's pretty much everywhere. But yeah, you look at that stuff and it's like, okay, you talk about what they plan on doing. Hell, we don't even know if Wrath is going to launch. To be honest with you, I mean, we all have speculation that it's going to launch. We assume it's going to launch, but like I said back then, if TBC doesn't do well, what's the motivation for them to launch a Wrath of the Lich King? I mean, TBC hasn't done well compared to, you look at Classic Vanilla, it hasn't even pulled anywhere near the same amount of players in.
Yeah, but it made money.
Oh, it made money, which they will do, which is why I think they will release a Wrath of the Lich King Classic, just for the simple fact that it's an easy money grab. But it's night and day when you look at the TBC and how the private server scene translated into the Classic scene. It's kind of, I expected it. I don't know what your thoughts on it were going to be when it released, but I called it out the moment that questionnaire came out. I uploaded a video about it saying it's not going to have the player base, and it could actually hurt them by doing this, going forward and releasing a Wrath or a Cataclysm, which I don't think Cata will come. But anyways,
here's my issue with the TBC dual spec. Okay, I've been ranting on it on my stream, forever. I've been ranting to my guildies forever. Kigo was just in the chat dropping by saying hi. I played with him on Endless, and here's the thing: there were like this timed dungeon runs, heroic runs, right? So the way the server was made was we would run a heroic dungeon, and whoever ran the fastest held the record. And it was uploaded to the website and stuff like that. It was integrated, and there was a pop-up message in the chat, right? It would tell you, okay, fastest run is 15 minutes 40, your current run is 16 minutes 10. And you're like, damn, bro, we were 30 seconds away. Bro, if we just managed one better AoE pull, we would be the server fastest. And we did that. We actually held records on that server. We had really strong 5-man dedicated people, really, really good players. And we would be running that. And it was really, really fun. Like I, for example, was a red paladin, but I didn't care because I would get all of the prot gear no one cared about. I would be tanking Karas, and I would be just soaking all of this prot gear so I could play prot. And I had a dual spec. Sure, I kept my red spec up to date, enchanted the gemmed it. I played red, primarily I played red for the 25 mans. But, lo and behold, we're in SSC and like, hey, Fark, how is your prot set? Of course, my prot set is amazing, immaculate. What is up? Hey, can you tank the trash between boss 2 and boss 3? Of course I can tank the trash. It's not an issue. So it just, for me, just personally, me, I love it. I love it. I am playing a paladin. I'm not a prot paladin that's just sitting there and like, I don't know. Gee, I suck on this boss because it has mana burn. I guess, I guess I'm gonna have to equip Holy's gear and that's it. No, I get to go red and DPS the boss, right? I might pull my punches a bit back. I might approach my rotation differently. Use more mana pots, freaking those demonic runes, stuff like that, right? Imagine how many people would get into PvP if there was dual spec. Like, we're currently playing in the meta of warlocks. All of these warlocks can transition into SL warlocks, which is the most popular PvP spec of warlocks ever, debatably, right? And so when they really pop off in arenas and stuff like that, and they don't get to experience that. How many mages could play Frost in PvP? How many Fury Warriors could play Arms in PvP, right? Sure, if you're playing sword spec, you might kind of pull it off, stuff like that, but these specs are not the same. How many Resto Druids could have a Boomkin spec, etc., 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 right? And I think not having dual spec hurts the game so much, especially coming from someone who has experienced it and playing with people who have experienced it as well. It hurts us so much. Like, you need to respec all the time. It is a massive gold sink. It is a massive inconvenience, because do keep in mind this: every time you respec, you need to fix your bars, you need to redo your talents. God forbid you miss a talent point, right? Because if you're doing it all the time, kind of want to do it fast, it's tedious, annoying. Just a misclick, damn, boom, 50 gold down the drain. Now you hate it even more. So here is the deal that I've been ranting on, and I really think Blizzard massively effed it up by launching TBC with no dual spec. Sure, we love the nostalgia, okay, that's fine and dandy, but let's say how things are, guys, okay? They introduced changes, okay? They introduced changes to TBC. We're not talking about not changes anymore. There are changes, because I don't know if do you remember the hashtag no changes thing?
I remember reading about it. Yes, I remember the movement. Yeah, now you mention it. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
And here's the thing: we have changes, right? They messed with leatherworking, right? They changed how the drums work completely. They gave Seal of Vengeance / Seal of Truth to Horde Paladins. They gave Seal of Blood / Seal of Martyr to humans, to human Paladins, right? Sorry, Alliance Paladins, rather, right? To specify that. They changed the game, right? We had Mount Hyjal on launch. We had Tier 5 on launch back in the day. They changed it, right? Now we have like tiered release of patches, so they are changing the game. We're not getting the original game the way it was. Why were we not getting dual spec? And here's my issue with that. I think we're also be gonna getting Wrath of the Lich King as it is. The only thing that, in my opinion, that might change is when is stuff being released, right? I think that's what might change. Like, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things also that was not on launch is the auction house in Dalaran if you're engineer. Like, they might launch that, they might not launch that. That's like so minor and so relevant that I don't think it's gonna do much. And I also think even the pre-nerf states, pre-nerf values of the bosses that they are in the game, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough, to be honest. We know that they can fix the HP values of the bosses on the fly. We've seen that with McTerridan. We've seen them fix pretty much within 5 hours increase and decrease HP values of the said bosses. They can do the same thing with the damage values. If anything, and this is the worst type of buffing that you can do by far, but if you ask me, should they at least increase HP values of some bosses just so it's not a freaking Rufflecopter Fiesta and Loot Pinata? I would say yes. Now, I went on a massive rant and I apologize for that. I do tend to be ranty. I do want to hear a little bit on your rant, Funky.
No, I'm the same way. It's you look at how easy the content has been and private server wise. Granted, again, the things that come with private servers not being 100% scripted and stuff, but even when the HP buffs have been there and in place, even when the damage buffs have been increased, either on private server, they either break them completely or it's still not enough. It's still a joke of a fight. So what they plan on doing as far as changes, I don't know what Wrath they can really do. TBC, there was a lot of broken classes that just weren't up to par. So I get some of the changes there. Obviously, dual spec, that's been argued back even when, classic vanilla launched, they should have a dual spec. And there were those who, and I'm kind of in both camps when it comes to this. Do you, make it exactly 100% like you were talking about, no changes? Do you make it exactly like that? Just launch it and just go with the flow and do no changes whatsoever? Or do you try to make, things change in Classic? And I don't know how they're planning on doing that for Classic because, or at least Wrath rather, not TBC. TBC had stuff it could have been fixed, and I think some of it's for the good, some of it's for the bad. People like it, people don't like it. But what are you really going to change in Wrath of the Lich King? I don't really see where they're going to be doing anything as far as Wrath goes that's going to really make any kind of difference other than making the bosses hit harder or HP values different. Maybe, there's a certain class that maybe, like, for example, Restoration Shamans, it's really hard to get, you need a ton of haste. It's really hard to get haste rating. Maybe they might change some of the items, the gear, how it drops. Same thing with Restoration Druid, how we need so much haste. Maybe they might add more haste to items or redo the stats on items. But other than that, what are you going to change that's really going to affect the game other than HP values and making things hit a little bit harder? I mean, because like you said, Wrath has, we've got dual spec. Are you going to release RDF? I guess that's a big one. Are you going to release RDF at, the start of Ice Crown Citadel, which is what it was released back in the day in retail, or are you going to start right off the rip with RDF? That's going to be something, because a lot of people who are playing private servers, they are not used to having to actually put together a 5-man dungeon group. They're used to just hitting default I on the keyboard and just joining a random dungeon. So that might be something that I don't know how they plan on implementing that or what their plans are for RDF. But beyond that, that's a few minor things here and there that I really am curious as to what they're going to change and what is going to happen and how you would even make the content even relatively hard. I don't know, beyond adding in, like we were talking about, HP values and more damage.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the clock. I realize that we are approaching the rev range. So kind of, to slowly steer it in that direction and wrap it up a little bit. RDF changes, I don't think we're gonna get it on release, and this is just my 2 cents. I could be completely wrong. So
I agree. I don't think we'll get it on launch either.
Could be wrong. Don't quote me on this. Oh, Fark said. No. The reason why I think we won't get it is because I think there is a matchmaking system in place that they need to look at. What I'm talking about here is I think they need to look at the code itself and the way it works. First of all, they need to decide, is the RDF going to be only server-based, or is there going to be a battle group? That's the first thing. Second thing is, there are no battle groups in TBC. Everything is just, whatever. NA is NA, EU is EU. Right? So everything is one big battle group. Of course, not cross-Atlantic, but, there are no battle groups like we had them historically back in the day. Like, oh, these 4 servers, these 3 servers, these 5 servers, right? So that begs the question, like, okay, if we are getting RDF, does that mean that I can get in a dungeon with anyone and everyone? And here's a different question. Can I invite someone to my group from a different server and then queue for RDF? Now here's the deal. They have that system in place. During TBC pre-patch, you could invite people from other servers and they could join your Nax lockout. So you had people from completely different servers raiding with you normally, right? And there was a lot of speculation. Oh, so it doesn't matter on which server you are anymore. And, they kind of reverted that change. They realized, oh, it's a bug. And then, if you think about it, if you remember this, if an individual remembers this, you might ask yourself a question. Wait, that's not a bug. That's a feature they have underneath the coat of layer that we see as a game. So here's the deal. RDF, in my opinion, from what I've seen, from the way they handle code, either it's going to be like completely, region-wide, or there's going to be none at all. The reason why I think it's going to be none at all is because there is this clunky, weird, bad UI, LFG that you have from TBC, and that came late, right? That came late. They had to look at it, right? They had to polish it, and that's a really bad version of LFG, right? A super bad version of LFG. It's RFD LFG, right? The same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the same thing. I think we're going to get subscriber drop-off during Uldor patch, and I think that's when I'm going to launch it. That's kind of my 2 cents. I think it's going to be like, oh, Uldor is here, or maybe TOC. It could be TOC patch, or it could be ICC. But from a business point of view, I think they need to cook it. I think they need to bake it. They need to polish it, and they will release it probably at a later patch. Could be Uldor, TOC, or ICC, right?
So are you looking forward to the Wrath patch, or the Wrath in general, I should say? Wrath Classic?
Yes and no. Here's my deal. As I said, dude, I have details. I have DBM. I have all of these add-ons. Some of them are backported. Some of them don't even exist on retail, dude. Like, some of these add-ons don't even exist. Like raid cooldowns. Like the add-on I use for raid cooldowns, I can't use that on TBC, and most likely won't be able to use it for Classic Wrath, right? Sure, there's workarounds, don't get me wrong, oh, Fark, what are you talking? Guys, I'm aware of it. I'm talking about the specific add-on. It's just my comfort zone, right? I can adjust to a different add-on. Here's my deal. As I said, Legion models, add-ons, cross-faction raiding even now, on Warmane, even different raiding, Frostmourne 1 double resets, Frostmourne 2, Zuluman was unique, in the way it drops TOC loot. I'm looking forward. The only reason I'm looking forward to Classic Wrath is going to be logging. It's going to be logs. That's literally the only reason. Parsing, right? Parsing and being really competitive, that's what motivates me, right? I'm not there to experience it for the first time. I couldn't care less, really. about the lore anymore. You know, I've been there, I've done that for so long. I love the lore, don't get me wrong, but I'm not gonna play the game. I'm not gonna raid for lore, if it makes any sense, right? Or for the story or for the feels, or not, just to drop a campfire and really and you know, enjoy the environment. Sure, I appreciate, you know, the terrain, going, you know, from the trash to Miberon and stuff like that. I have appreciation for that, but I'm not really there, you know, to be a tourist. I'm there to smash, and that's what I want to do as well. We had some amazing people in my journey through TBC that I've met who have parsed incredibly well and who have helped me parse as well. I held some records at the time. Even our guild held some records at the time. We had amazing parsing records on certain bosses, either DPS wise or speed kills or whatever. And I kind of want to do the same, really. In my opinion, I want to push those parses. I want to push those numbers, and you get to do it in a little bit more official way than you do in Warmane, right? Warband is amazing, don't get me wrong. You have those speed timers, you have those speed kills, but it just is, it doesn't hit the same as Warcraft logs, in my opinion. That's the major driving factor for me, for Wrath of the Lich King Classic, right? Wrath Classic Wrath. Logs and pushing and logs. My biggest worry is it's going to be shit show and it's going to be a buggy mess. Right? That's essentially where I stand. I think it's going to be very, very buggy, right? I don't know, where do you stand? What drives you? What's your fuel in the engine?
It's kind of funny looking at it now, looking basically down the barrel where we're headed. You know, I've done this in retail, Realm First, done it retail, ICC, you know, did all that, and then Warming, Realm First again, did all that. You know, I've solo healed Light of Dawn and all this goofy stuff that I've done on my Restoration Druid. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm in that dad group. I'm 36. I've got a kid. I'm married. I hope that my two biggest fears, looking at least from a Restoration Druid standpoint, is that I'm able to play and go and farm Valinir, because I think that the ability to have that mace is really going to be really powerful moving into Icecrown Citadel, especially. So I fear personally trying to get that mace, going against 200 other 1,000 healers trying to get that mace. And then I look at, like you said, logs. That's actually one of my fears, is that maybe people are looking into this parsing stuff a little too hard, because parses can be manipulated in a certain way. For example, let's look at parses for like if you were to look at parses for Restoration Druid, and you got some guy out here who's they're 3 healing it, right? And he's like, man, I did really good. And then you've got my old ass out here solo healing it. Of course, I'm going to have the top parse out of everyone else because I've done solo healed it. And that setup and what you're using to solo heal is entirely different than what you would use in a more optimal setting, let's say a 3 or a 4 heal raid. And I think people are going to look at parses just like they do on meters, like your scata or your recount, etc. And they're going to be like, oh, hey, this guy did this, and he's using this, and this, and I'm just going to copy and do what he did, and I'll be good. And that, without knowing what you're doing, it makes all the difference in the world. And I think the other thing that really scares me moving forward into Classic, and we've touched on it, you and I spoke before this about it, is the amount of just guides out there that are wrong.
Yeah.
You look at these channels, these people promoting all this stuff that's not even true. And I think for me, it's always been, at least the last couple of years, I'd say the last 7 years I've been playing, it's been about getting the correct information out to the player base, which is something that it was really easy to do back when this was retail. The problem is there's no checks and balances here. Nobody is calling these players out that need to be called out for misinformation, for things that are wrong. I'm fine if somebody wants to say, hey, this is what I use in my guild and I like it because X, Y, and Z. This is my setup, my gear. I'm fine with that. I got no problem with that. It's when you're trying to promote something as being, this is the best way to play this class, or this stat does this, when it clearly doesn't. We have tons of examples, like, you know, Crusader Strike resetting Divine Storm, for example. which I'm sure we'll get into one day.
Oh yeah.
You got people out there like that, and you're like, how do you combat that when they're have a much bigger following, when they have people that they're just misleading off to the ledge? And it's going to lead to so much, I guess for me, being a theory crafter myself and going through all this stuff and knowing what's right, what's wrong, it's going to be such an absolute headache to go into a guild run or go into a pug run, for example, and see this stuff. Then you're just going to be like, what in the hell is going on here? Like, you guys aren't doing this right, that right. And I've already been through it once on private servers, and kind of in retail, we kind of really didn't do a whole lot of that stuff. Or if somebody did call you out, you would go and research it, or they would help you research it and they would fix it or help you fix it, or you would fix it. That doesn't exist now. Now you've got varying opinions. You've got people, they point to, hey, well, this video says this. You're wrong, Funky, but here's the math. I can show you the math. I don't care about your math. This is what this guy does. He's pulling 15,000 HPS on this boss, and you're only pulling 12. Well, that's because what I'm doing is more useful for the raid. He's maybe solo healing or using yet less healers, or maybe he's using the wrong spells. He's only using rejuvenation, wild growth, whereas I'm covering the tanks as well. So that takes away from my overall HPS, but we're killing the boss. They might wipe a few times. Sure, that person might be able to pull more healing, HPS per second, but that means nothing at the end of the day if you don't know the ins and the outs of the class or how to play it properly. You shouldn't go off that person over there just because they have high numbers on a meter. That means absolutely zero, nothing. And I think those three things, the misinformation, me trying to go back to get Valinor yet again, and then having time to do it now that I'm a father and a husband, that's going to be difficult. And then going talking about the parses and stuff, just people going off the wrong misinformation and the misinformation out there. Those are probably the three biggest things that I'm not looking forward to.
Yeah,
I am looking forward to having a scripted server, somewhere where we can go and play and have it scripted. No more crashes, no more bullshit, no more terrible devs, no more terrible moderators and things like that. So that's me.
I would just like to reiterate super quick. When I said parsing, I probably should have made a disclaimer: speed kills, as in who kills the boss faster. And that includes 10 men and heroic versions as well, right? So like, using niche strategies, solo tank, solo heroes, certain fights, and push the speed kills.
I get that too. Because really, what else is there to do? Like, there's nothing else to do. That's what a lot of guilds on Icecrown have started doing, or all these other realms have started doing. They're just trying to push speed kills because, it's something new. Let's try to use 25 mages or 24 mages on Lich King, or let's try to solo heal with a Restoration Druid or a Holy Priest. Two healers that you wouldn't think could actually solo heal, or that aren't optimal for solo healing. Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. Let's push the limits of these classes. Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that one.
It's like having the pink on the bars is nice and everything. I don't think it's going to matter that much for tanking, except on certain fights. Maybe that's for a different episode when we can cover tanking. I want to get into nitty gritty on that. It's really we're slowly segueing out of this episode. But I do agree with you that most definitely that you made this comment that people are going to lack the perception when it comes to logs and parsing. As you said, you might have a shadow priest helping you with a certain thing, right? Let's just say, a shadow priest casts a hymn on the fight where there's some AoE and helps you cover the raid healing when you're 1 or 2 healing, right? That shadow priest all of a sudden is going to have a lower parse because they have lower uptime on the boss. Because how long is the channel? At least a couple of seconds, 4 to 5. Don't quote me, right? It's a decently long channel. It's not like a 1 or 2 second channel. And it's a potent spell. It's a raid CD, right? You have a shadow priest like that helps you, push the fight. They might lose 5 seconds of their DPS, but overall you get the whole DPS throughout the phase, right? And that's the thing. Those parses are gonna be all over the place, and I think the best way you can look at it is just simply the speed kills, right? I think that's going to be the best parse. You parse as a group, not an individual. Don't get me wrong, you can still parse individually, right? You can still like have like, I mean, patchwork. Realistically, what is there to be done except downsize healers? I don't know. Like, what would be the bring two holy paladins? I don't know, right? I probably maybe from top of my head, trying to think about it, right?
Yeah, that's mostly though if you're pushing like, if you're pushing world first, which but there's another thing real quick. Achievements. That's going to kind of change the game too. When you talk about classic to TBC, there's really nothing else to really do in the game other than go farm, materials and things like that. Whereas, hey, in Wrath, you get, hey, maybe I'll go get this achievement. Maybe I'll work on this. Maybe I'll work on that. There's always something more to do. I think that'll give players incentive more to stay in the game.
Actually, now that you say that, I become so desensitized when it comes to the achievements because fresh switch. I literally don't care about mounts except the older one because it's 310%. Right? I like that
the
one.
Ironbound Proto.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the only thing I care about out of any and all achievements. That's literally the only one I care about because it gives me direct boost to my player character. But now that you bring it up, there is, I mean, we can, maybe have a podcast on that one and just discuss all of the different achievements that there are later down the road. But it is a fair point. Yes, achievements are going to be integral part of your character development, like tier 7 Red Proto Drake. I have yet to see a single group do that on a private server, I'm not gonna lie. Pretty sure there have been. I'm talking as of late, like recently. I don't think there's been that many people doing that just simply because they know, oh, I'm here now, tomorrow I'm gone. I mean, this Red Proto Drake is just gonna go to waste, right?
Oh yeah, for the most part, yeah. And then you look at it beyond even when you get into ICC. I mean, the 310 mount in Wotlk, not to get onto a mount tangent here, but you look at the mount in Wotlk, which is a lot harder to achieve than the one in Ice Crown Citadel that you get for doing all the achievements. And you can choose, hey, do I want to do the 10-man version, which is really easy, or do I want to do the 25-man version, which is a little harder? But either way, you're getting a 310 mount at that point in time in the game.
Yeah. All right. To wrap it up, do you have anything that you would like to say at the end of the show?
No, other than I hope, this kicks off something where we can just sit and kind of talk. And hopefully it does, I'm sure it'll start off slow and maybe we can, get into more detailed stuff later, especially when Wrath gets closer and we start hearing announcements and things like that. I think, this will be fun to discuss. And, hopefully, like we've mentioned, bringing other people in to give their opinions and stuff like that as well, where we can have kind of like a group discussion. That'll be interesting as well to hear other people's opinions too on it. I think you and I kind of agree on a lot of the stuff and where we're going, what's good, what's bad, etc. It'd be interesting to hear, maybe another point of view because I really love to hear people's opinions on this stuff that just totally blow my mind because it's like, how do you get to this point? But as far as the podcast and today, I think we covered what, pretty much went over the backgrounds of what we do, discuss some of the TBC changes and, possible Wrath things, which we'll get into more detail later. But no, overall, I enjoyed it. And I hopefully, this becomes a regular thing we can do and have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. For those wondering and those who are actually listening this part, thank you. Even if just clicked it, you managed to randomly get to this part at the end, or you actually listened to the whole thing. Thank you so much. This has been an introduction to the podcast. This is a shared project between Funky and me. Once again, one of the best rested druids possible out there. I'm gonna keep hyping him for sure. Big brain rested druid that has done it all. He's healed Algalons and healed Lich King heroics, so he has the experience when it comes to having your heart bursting with the BPMs. But yeah, we're going to transition that into something different. We want to have a nice Wrath of the Lich King podcast, and we want to share the truth. And I think one of the biggest things that Russell's My Gym is what Funky also mentioned is there's so many guides out there that are basically, crafted in a way that author can be assumed to have below room temperature IQ, simply because it's mathematical nonsense. And I think we're going to cover that in the future as well. So, stay tuned for that. We're going to poke the fire with a stick, and let's see what happens from that. But yeah, not to prolong this any further. Do you want to plug something at the end, Funky?
No, I just want to say, Fark put this all together and hit me up with it. So I give all credit to him for that part and doing the whole breakdown of this episode. That's all on him. I am, no offense to anybody out there, I am super busy, so I don't have the time. And the time that I do have, I'm currently working on the tier gear and the hep lists and everything else to do with Restoration Druid, so we can have a full tier breakdown, a much more in-depth guide. That's kind of been my focus here for the past month or so. So I give all credit to Fark for setting this up and doing it. And as far as that goes, just stay tuned. Both their YouTube channels are up top. I'm not really on Twitch a whole lot anymore. I know Fark is more, so go check them out. And yeah, that's all I really got for the ending of that.
Hey, all I'm gonna end with is it takes two for tango, my friend. And if you weren't here, this couldn't come to fruition in any way, shape, or form. So thank you very much for participating. I had an absolute blast doing this with you.
Same.
I envision it being a blast. I had an absolute blast. Thank you for everyone that came. Obviously, we don't stream usually these hours, but you can find this episode on YouTube. In the future, we might use SoundCloud. I will look into that. But once again, not to prolong it anymore. Thank you for watching and or listening. Have a nice day and see you on the next one.